Hello and welcome back to Learn the Bible in a Year for January 20th, 2026. Hey, if you've been listening to this show and this is your, I don't know, fourth or fifth episode, do me a big favor and hit that subscribe, follow button and the like button wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast. Doing that really helps the algorithm know that you like it and it helps the show out a lot. So I totally appreciate you doing that. And today's reading, we're going to be reading through Genesis chapter 40, Genesis chapter 41, verses 1 through 40. Also, Matthew chapter 14, verses 1 through 21. And then we're finishing up today in Proverbs. We're in chapter 2, verses 12 through 22. So without wasting any more time, let's jump into the recap. So we're starting in Genesis 40, and Joseph is in prison. Remember, we talked about that yesterday, where Potiphar's wife got him in big trouble. And the warden, though, has put him in charge of two prisoners. I didn't know you could be put in charge of other prisoners as a prisoner, but that's what the warden did. And the two prisoners are Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker. In ancient Egypt, these weren't just like minor servants. The cupbearer tasted the king's wine to ensure that it was not poisoned, and the baker prepared royal food. So both of these prisoners had direct access to Pharaoh, which made them powerful and dangerous. So one wrong move here from Joseph, and he could be accused of conspiracy. Both men have dreams the same night. The next morning, Joseph notices that they looked dejected. They explain they've had dreams, but there's no one to interpret them. In that culture, dream interpretation was a professional skill, kind of like being a blacksmith or a baker, kind of like the baker guy is. Egypt had trained dream interpreters, and these guys are in prison with no access to those folks. Joseph says interpretations belong to God. He's giving the glory back to God. But tell me your dreams, he says. The cupbearer goes first. In his dream, there is a vine with three branches. It buds, blossoms, and produces ripe grapes. What great news. He takes the grapes, squeezes them into Pharaoh's cup, and puts the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Joseph interprets. The three branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position. You'll put the cup in his hand just like before. But when all goes well, remember me. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and here I've done nothing to deserve this dungeon. Then the baker sees the good interpretation and he shares his dream. He has 3 bread baskets in his hand. The top basket is full of baked goods for Pharaoh, but birds are eating them. Joseph's interpretation ain't so great. The 3 baskets represent 3 days, so within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and birds will eat your flesh. Stark difference between the two dreams and interpretations. I certainly would rather be the cupbearer in this story. So then 3 days later, it's Pharaoh's birthday. He throws a feast for all of his officials. He restores the cupbearer to his position, but impales the baker, exactly like Joseph predicted. But the cupbearer forgets all about Joseph. He doesn't even mention him. Gosh, if Joseph didn't have bad luck, he wouldn't have any luck at all. So Genesis 41 now, and we're only reading verses 1 through 40 today. 2 full years pass, and Joseph is still in prison. Then Pharaoh himself has 2 dreams. He's standing by the Nile when 7 cows, sleek and fat, come up and graze. Then 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, come up and eat the fat cows. Odd. Pharaoh wakes up, falls asleep again, and has another dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, are growing on a single stalk. Then 7 thin heads, scorched by the east wind, sprout up and swallow the healthy grain. In the morning, Pharaoh is troubled. He summons all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. In the Egyptian culture, these were trained professionals who studied dreams and omens and things like that. But no one could interpret Pharaoh's dreams. Then the cupbearer, mind you, 2 years later, remembers Joseph. He tells Pharaoh about the Hebrew in prison who correctly interpreted dreams 2 years ago. Pharaoh immediately sends for Joseph. They quickly shave him and change his clothes. Egyptians were clean shaven, while Hebrews typically wore beards, so Joseph had to be made presentable according to the Egyptian customs. Pharaoh says, I had a dream and no one can interpret it. I've heard that you can interpret dreams. Joseph corrects him. He says that he cannot interpret the dreams, but God will give Pharaoh the answer that he desires. Once again, Joseph is pointing back up to God to get all the glory. Joseph consistently points away from himself to God, which would have been totally countercultural to the dream interpreters there in Pharaoh. So Pharaoh tells both dreams to Joseph. Joseph says they're actually one dream. God is revealing what he is about to do. 7 good cows and 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. 7 worthless cows and 7 scorched heads are 7 years of famine. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout Egypt. Then 7 years of famine will follow, so severe that the abundance will be forgotten. The reason the dream came in 2 forms is that the matter is firmly decided by God and he will do it soon. Joseph doesn't stop at interpretation, he gives a proposal. Let Pharaoh find a discerning and wise man and put him in charge. Appoint commissioners to take a fifth of the harvest during the 7 good years. Store up grain under Pharaoh's authority as a reserve for 7 years of famine. Otherwise, Egypt will be ruined. And this plan seems pretty good to Pharaoh and his officials. Pharaoh asks if they can find anyone like Joseph, somebody who has the Spirit of God in him. He tells Joseph that since God has made all of this known to him, no one is as discerning and as wise. You will be in charge of my palace, and all my people will submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will Pharaoh be greater. That is one big promotion from in prison to second to the Pharaoh. Joseph goes from prison to second in command in Egypt in one conversation. He's 30 years old. Remember, when he was 17 is when his brothers sold him. So 13 years of slavery and false imprisonment. And now, all of a sudden, he's elevated to massive power. All right, jumping over into Matthew, and we read chapter 14, verses 1 through 21 today. The text opens up talking about Herod Tetrarch. Now, Herod the Tetrarch is the son of Herod Antipas, and Antipas was the Herod that wanted to kill Jesus after he was born, after he had had conversations with the wise men. We all remember that story. And he tells his attendants, meaning Herod the Tetrarch, this must be John the Baptist risen from the dead, and that's why miraculous powers are at work in him. Herod the Tetrarch thinks that John the Baptist and Jesus are actually the same person. But Matthew backs up to explain. Herod had arrested John because John told him it wasn't lawful to be married to Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. Herod wanted to kill John, but feared the people who considered him a prophet. On Herod's birthday, Herodias' daughter dances for their guests. Herod is so pleased that he promises with an oath to give her whatever she asks. Prompted by her mother, she says, give me John the Baptist's head on a platter. Herod is distressed. He's really trapped in this situation. He gave this oath, but he's still afraid of what the people will do if he kills who they call a prophet. So, what does he do? Well, he obeys his oath and he beheads John the Baptist in prison. When Jesus hears this, remember, John the Baptist is Jesus' cousin, so they're family. When he hears this, he withdraws by a boat to a solitary place. But crowds follow him on foot from the towns. When Jesus lands and sees a large crowd, he has compassion and heals their sick. As evening approaches, the disciples suggest sending the crowds away to buy food. Jesus says they don't need to go. You should give them something to eat. They say, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. Jesus tells them to bring the food to him. He has the crowds sit down on the grass and then he breaks the loaves and gives thanks. He gives them to the disciples and the disciples distribute it to the people. Everyone eats and is satisfied, and they gather 12 basketfuls of leftovers. About 5,000 men ate, not counting women and children, so the actual number is probably around 15,000 people ate from just a couple of loaves of bread and some fish. Very famous, very fantastic miracle. Now into Proverbs chapter 2, verses 12 through 22, this continues the father's teaching about wisdom. Wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse. They leave straight paths to walk in dark ways. They delight in doing wrong and rejoice in the pervertedness of evil. Their paths are crooked and devious. Wisdom will save you from the adulterous woman, from the wayward woman with her seductive words. She left the partner of her youth and ignored the covenant she made before God. Her paths lead down to death. Thus, you'll walk in the ways of the good and keep to the paths of the righteous. The upright will live in the land, and the blameless will remain in it. But the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the unlawful will be torn from it. The language about the land connects to Israel's covenant. Staying in the promised land requires faithfulness. Wickedness led to exile. Wisdom isn't just smart thinking, it protects from paths that lead to death and loss. All right, that's the recap of today's reading. Just a quick word from our wonderful sponsor over at Covenant Security Equipment. Covenant Security Equipment is a Christian owned company that partners with building contractors who build with safety in mind. They sell bullet resistant windows, secure transaction systems, drive through installations, as well as much, much more. Go ahead and check out these goods at covenantsecurityequipment.com, or you can click on the link to their website, which is in the show notes. We're going to jump into our questions here. For those of you who have not yet picked up a workbook, make sure you go ahead and grab one of those workbooks. The digital copy of the workbook is 100% free to you. The link to that is also in the show notes. You can also pick up a paperback version. That is what I typically work out of. The paperback version, I think, is far, far superior, but you can choose whichever one you would like. The link to both of those are in the show notes. All right, the questions for today. So, for what we read in Genesis 40 and 41, Joseph spent years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, yet he continued to serve faithfully. And here's the question: when life is unfair and your circumstances don't improve, how do you keep serving God with excellence? All right, question number 2 from what we read in Matthew. Jesus fed the 5,000 men with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And here's the question: when has God multiplied your inadequate resources to meet an overwhelming need? He's done this for me several times. I'm curious if any of you have wonderful stories to share about how the Lord's done this. Throw that in the comments section. I'd love to hear a story like that. Question number 3 from what we read in Proverbs: wisdom will save you from those whose words are perverse, who have left the straight path. So here's the question: what voices or influences are trying to lead you off the straight path right now? What are some of those things we need to cut out of our lives because they are not leading us to wisdom? And question number 4, which is the same question we have every day, and that is: what is your main takeaway from today's reading? My main takeaway today is Joseph's patience. Joseph was patient and he was upright. Now, there's an elder and a friend of mine at the church that I go to here in North Idaho who says that patience is the currency of heaven. We always want things to happen right now, but God has his perfect timing. And in the case of Joseph here, it was in God's perfect timing to wait 13 years to restore him after he was sold into slavery. I think if Joseph can wait 13 years to be brought full circle, I think I can wait maybe one more day to get the air quotes justice that I feel like I deserve. What about you? I'd be curious to hear what your main takeaways are from today. All right, well, that's the recap for today, and I will see all of you hot diggity dogs again here tomorrow.